Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, and the foes out there. Welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this episode on all 3 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky. Do remember to click subscribe. Today's guest is coming on for a second time. He's a dear brother and friend of mine. He's a criminal defense lawyer, the founder and owner of Liberty Law in Luton. He has made appearances on the famous British police show 24 Hours in Police Custody. But more importantly and more relevant for today's discussion, he is also running as the independent parliamentary candidate in Luton South, and that's none other than brother Attiq Malik.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you, bro?
Alhamdulillah.
How's things?
Yeah, good. Surviving each day as we go.
A couple of years ago, we were here for Blood Brothers Season 2. In my front room, you in your t-shirt, more chilled out. Now it's a bit more formal,
yeah.
right? How's it been? You've got 4 weeks to go.
4 weeks to go, 4 weeks to hit hard, 4 weeks to get the message out there of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And 4 weeks to try and bring some change, not just to Luton, but to this country and the way politics are done.
Now look, one of the key things, at least for the Muslim community, this general election undoubtedly will be Gaza, right? And in fact, as part of your campaign, it's, I stand for Luton, I stand for Gaza, I stand for change, right? Why has it had such a significant impact on you, so much so that it's led you to run for elections a second time?
How can it not? We see, to be honest with you, I can't even watch. When I see on social media what Israel is doing to our children, decapitated bodies, people being killed every day, 2 million people displaced, 40 to 50,000 people killed, almost 20,000 children killed, targeted deliberately. If this doesn't move the human heart to action, then what does? We've seen the government of this country not call out criminality, racism, genocide. And if the governments of this world are not going to do anything, what comes to mind is an old activist adage that we've used in the past when we've done protests and all the rest of it. Of there is no justice, there's just us. We have to stand. We would be held accountable. We have to choose what side of history we're going to stand on. What's happening here, as tragic as it is also a key moment in history. You must have seen on social media and other commentators saying that it's obvious many years from now there'll be books written and movies made about this, evil time that this whole world is going through and witnessing, live genocide broadcast. And all of us, people will ask the question, we'll ask ourselves the question, what did we do at the time? Did we do everything we possibly could? When it comes to Sadaqah Jariyah, our communities, of course, it's good. We send money, we try and give food, we try and give clothing. But one thing that is missing in our communities, in terms of Sadaqah Jariyah and giving money, is giving money to strategic thinking and strategic manoeuvring. And this, for our communities, is exceptionally important. To be honest with you, even brothers like yourself and many others out there, you've helped inspire us in the community to move strategically and think strategically. How do we make this government have some regard to the Muslim position, to the human position? What do they care about? We've seen they don't care about international criminal courts. They don't care about what the rest of the world says. The only thing they care about is power and money. So we need to target that. When an election is happening, what matters to them the most is the votes. So we need to show them that we're not going to be taken for granted. We're not your slaves. If you're going to support evil, we won't support you. And this is what the campaign's about. It's about bringing change, getting those voices in Parliament that are not held back by party politics, because party politics just doesn't work. We want those in government who will stand for justice, for humanity, not just for Muslims or just for Palestine, but for the whole of humanity. There's injustices everywhere. You can't have people, for example, speaking for the justice of Palestine and Kashmir and not for the Rohingya or the Uyghurs, or for those in the Congo, Or in Sudan, evil is evil, and we have to stand for everybody. And then even if there are situations where what we're trying to do in terms of getting someone into parliament doesn't work, if we shake the system strong enough and show them that our voice counts, our position matters, then they'll have regard to our position. And if by having regard to our position, we can save a single human life, we all know the saying. You save a single human life, it's like saving humanity.
Absolutely.
We're not talking about a single life here. We're talking about the life of 2 million people.
Talking of strategic thinking and manoeuvring, kind of just taking back a few months back now, there was an article hit job on you. It talked about a particular role that you had in advising the police and holding them to account in terms of proportionate policing, especially during this critical period of pro-Palestine marches every other weekend. And there was a negative media coverage with regards to this position becoming apparent. Can you shed a bit of light of what actually happened?
This position and what happened, I wear as a badge of honor, because it shows, as far as we're concerned, where we are fighting for justice and speaking against injustice, especially against establishment, sooner or later they always say they will come for you. And if something like this doesn't happen, then you're doing something wrong. That's the way I see it, and many in my circles, particularly in the anti-racism and anti-discrimination circles that we move in. At the time, and that's got a story behind it as well, I had become the chair of the independent advisory group for the Muslim community of London to Met Command. It was a voluntary role. It wasn't linked to the police. It wasn't working for the police. It wasn't a paid role, which is important to say because the way the media ran it was as if I was their employee or something.
Yeah, like you're working for them.
I wasn't working for them. It was nothing like that. My role, external, appointed by the community, was to hold them to account. So when, for example, a child was strip searched in London, I would hold them to account and say, why is this discrimination happening? When there are stop and searches happening, we'd hold them to account and say, why are you doing it more to this community or not that community, or why are you doing it like this at all, etc. So our role as an IAG, as an external body, was to critique the police and make sure, A, that they don't overstep their bounds, but also to bring to their attention issues that are happening. So for example, I remember at the time when I was there was an issue in Croydon where a child was being groomed, and the police, rather than supporting the child, were trying to prosecute the child. And people were asking for help, saying, look, this child's a victim. And then we brought that to the police attention.
So you had this role before October the 7th?
Yeah, it was about almost a year or so. I was within the group, and about 6-7 months before October 7th, I was the chair. So that's just a flavour of how we would be pushing against the police on behalf of not even just the Muslim community. Yes, we were there for the Muslim community, but for the community of London, right? So if there were issues in other communities, we would still bring them up. And the beauty of the IEG that I was in, it was made up of representatives from the Somali community, the Arab community, different mosques all over London, East London, North London, West London, South London. So it was a representative body for all the Muslims. Mm-hmm. So
why was this an issue for the establishment then?
Well, this is the thing. October 7th happens. Suella Braverman makes a command to Met Police. Not that's her job to do so, but she thinks it is. Ban the Palestinian flag, ban the chants, ban the protest. Ourselves, the IAG, we send a communication to Met Command, meet with Met Command and say, look, if you follow any of that, it's illegal, we're going to sue you. And then we did a press release the next day. Other pressure was put on the police. Long story short, the police turned around and said to Suella, well, look, we're not going to ban anything. Egg on her face. The first major protest happens for Palestine. I am there with my team in Met Command, policing the police. So, for example, the police decided to do an emergency order to pull the masks of everybody at the protest, as and when they want. One of the team suggested, and we put this forward, that look, if you do this, you could be pulling the mask of a woman wearing a niqab. If you do that, you're going to have a problem, right? They said, actually, that's a very good point. So they would roll back on that. So this sort of thing was going back and forth. Okay. At that event, as we were monitoring, 2 of Suella Braverman's special advisors attended. And they recognised me and my team as being a thorn in Suella's side, because she's obviously trying to push that way, we're pushing again.
They're trying to get the ban through, and you're there advising, guiding, holding to account the police in terms of the implementation of some of these things that they want to push through.
And to make it crystal clear, we weren't begging the police, saying, oh, police, please don't do this. Our position was, do you know what, if you do it, we're going to sue you. So we were coming back hitting, not coming back begging. You see what I mean? That's the difference, right? So, you know, we're holding our position. Anyway, they come in, they recognise me and my group, and we recognise them as being her advisors. We've heard all of Suela's racist rhetoric. We've heard the way she talks about Pakistani men being part of grooming gangs, even though Home Office's own report on that says otherwise. You know, we've heard her racist rhetoric about refugees, about black people. You know, the list carries on, right? So we thought, well, these are her special advisors. She's spewing racist rhetoric. Let's have a chat with them. We asked for that chat. They refuse. That's their prerogative.
Well, why do they refuse?
They wouldn't give a reason. So we don't want to talk to you. We said, well, our position is we represent the electorate. You're advising someone who is elected. We just want to know what's going on. But if you don't want to speak to us, that's your prerogative. Anyway, that was that. Then fast forward, the article comes out.
Right.
And the article refers to the River from the Sea chant from 2 years ago. We don't need to go into that because we know that's nothing wrong with that chant, right? You know, that's a topic in itself.
Exactly.
But in the article, when they talk about the basis of them writing the article, there's a sentence which says he was spotted at Lambeth HQ, which takes us back to
the source of the story.
And the importance of this is this: strategic thinking, strategic maneuvering. We always need to see what others are doing. And this shows how strategically they're moving, how fearful they are of the voice, of speaking up, of dissent, that they would invest so much time, energy and money to try and silence us, to try and cancel us. And if anything, that's a reason for us to be motivated. That's a reason for us to support our groups and organizations that are speaking up, because the power of the voice you cannot undermine. People have always said, oh, what's the benefit of protest? What's the benefit of protest? We're seeing change. With student encampments all over the world, you know, they are bringing change. It doesn't happen overnight, but speaking up against injustice is a humanitarian requirement for human beings on this earth, as far as I'm concerned. And from our religious perspective, it's part of our spiritual faith.
Absolutely. So we've kind of established where the Tories have been unequivocally on this genocide, right? Consistent aiders and abettors, enablers, everything under the sun for the Zionist regime. Let's kind of look over the other side of the Commons. We have the Labour Party, a party which has traditionally had most of the Muslim votes, most of the working class votes that tend to come from socialist leanings or socioeconomic struggling areas and so forth, right? Do you believe the Labour Party is a party of genocide?
When a party leader, which then reflects the whole party, so it doesn't matter if we've got a nice MP here or a nice MP there, the party is shaped and led by their leader and what they push out. When you are not calling out genocide, then you are endorsing it. When you are not calling out,
well, he's gone further than that. He said on LBC he believes that they have the absolute right to stop water, food and electric.
Yes, exactly. And we're not calling out racism, you're upholding it. We're not calling out criminality, you're upholding it. And so this leadership that's coming in is not going to be any better than where the Tories are now. And let's not forget this. The Prevent programme, we all know about it. Who introduced that?
Labour.
Tony Blair.
Yeah.
Labour. And recently, in his most recent speech, Starmer has mentioned he's going to be tightening up on security policies within the country, including the contest programme.
Which Prevent falls under.
A lot of people have missed that. Mm-hmm. We are not just talking about Gaza here. The leadership of our country affects us here as well as abroad. And it's important to see what their mindset is. If someone has a racist mindset and have no regard for human life abroad, formula-wise, as far as I'm concerned, that means there's a good chance they will have a racist and a no regard for humanity domestically as well. And is that what we want as a leadership?
Brothers and sisters and friends, I see that you're enjoying the content. How come you've not clicked subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel? And if you're watching via Rumble, how come you've not subscribed on our Rumble channel? If you like the content, you like the guests, you like what we're talking about, it's absolutely inexcusable and cheeky for you not to click subscribe. Thank you and Jazakallah khair.
So the current MP that you're looking to unseat, Rachel Hopkins, she voted for a ceasefire. Now, many would say that's just simply not enough. It's too little, too late. Others are saying, well, it's better than a lot of other MPs have done. You mentioned it there. Is it strategically wise to punish, not that I'm saying that she is one of them, but for example, Apsana Begum or Zara Sultana or other MPs that have been quite, vocally pro-Palestine, have attended protests, have spoken at protests, right? Do you believe it's right to punish them as part of punishing the wider party?
The fact is this, when you're part of a party, you sign up to their policies and their principles. So let's just take this to, and it's not even that much of an extreme, because if Starmer does not call out racism and doesn't call out ethnic cleansing and genocide, then what difference is he from any other racist or Nazi party, right? So this is like saying if Britain First or Tommy Robinson was leading some racist party and there were some good people within that party, well, the fact is they shouldn't be part of that party in the first place. There are people of principle across the country who, when they've seen what Labour leadership are doing, have resigned from their position or resigned from the party. You could still be an MP and be independent. You don't have to be part of the party. If you know your party is not standing for good and is endorsing evil and you still decide to stay there, you become complicit. And I will take this one step further. We all know about the International Criminal Court's arrest warrants that are being considered, right? Now, let's just play with some hypothetical situation. Let's pretend, well, we don't have to pretend, it's most likely going to happen. Labour comes into power.
Will they implement that arrest warrant?
No, let's take this further. Labour comes into power. Arrest warrants are issued, and do they implement the arrest warrant? Do they call out criminality, etc.? Let's say some point in the future it is upheld that what Israel is doing in a court of law is a war crime. Because at the moment, an arrest warrant doesn't lead to conviction, right? It's like being, you're wanted for a crime by the police, but you're not convicted until a court decides.
Exactly.
Right? So let's just fast forward, and at some point it's held that there was a war crime done by Israel. Then what that means is anybody who supported Israel in doing that is complicit of that war crime. So then, if a warrant is issued domestically for the arrest of a party leader, for example, the Labour Party, because they're in power and they haven't recognised the arrest warrants, like you've said, or they haven't called out the genocide, and they've sent arms there, they've sent money there, they've become complicit, right? Not only can the leadership be liable for arrest and criminal prosecution, but so can every single MP representing them, because they are representing them.
Right.
So legally as well, whichever angle you look at it from, if you are part of the party, you become complicit because you're upholding their principles.
What would you say to those who will be voting for Rachel, but at the same time claim to be pro-Palestine, could very well be from the Muslim community themselves? We know how deeply embedded Labour is, even within brotherly politics, and even like localised back home type politics. We've seen it play out in Bethnal Green and Stepney. We're going to see it play out in some parts of Birmingham, possibly here as well. What would your message be for those Muslims who will still vote Labour?
If you're voting for Rachel, you are voting for Keir Starmer. That's the end game. You are giving him power. You are giving him votes. So if you're voting for Rachel, you are endorsing his position on genocide, his position on Israel and Palestine, his position domestically in this country of where people stand and how they should be treated. And the other thing is this: if you vote Rachel, you have to also look at what she actually done. Even Rachel herself, to this day, has not specifically said that what Israel is doing is a genocide. That word hasn't been used. The word war crime has not been used.
Not once.
The word racism has not been used yet. They've gone round in circles and said other things, but they haven't used it. Why not?
Has Rachel attended any pro-Palestine events?
She has attended pro-Palestine events, but they haven't used that terminology. Why not? Why would you not call it out?
Mm. Is it? She would argue, like every single Labour MP, Muslim and non-Muslim, said that, look, we're doing a lot behind the scenes. We're trying to hold the leader to account as much as we can. I mean, Mohammed Yassin, my local MP, he said the same, and Labour MPs up and down the country saying the same. That look, it's better to have us guys in there than out.
Well, this is the point. They're doing everything that they can, and what difference does it make?
It's made no visible
Nothing.
difference. No, yeah.
Nothing. Yeah, people are still being killed, and people are still being starved, and children are being beheaded. So it does nothing. And this is the whole point of why party politics doesn't work. This is the whole point why we need to consider having our own voice in Parliament, somebody who is not restricted by party politics or party agenda, somebody who can speak freely for the people that they represent, their constituency. So in my case, Luton South. Somebody whose only agenda is the agenda of the constituency that they represent, and not some hidden agenda. And also, let's be very clear of this. If these leaders are endorsing Israel, supporting Israel, they are not doing what this country and this country's people want. They are doing what a foreign body wants. So are they the control of a foreign entity? Is that what you want? Or do you want someone who's truly British?
Now, just on that point, talking about your constituency, right? You ran for election in 2015. You got 900 votes, 2.1% of the electorate or the vote count. A non-successful campaign. What's different this time? Many of your critics will say you've tried before. Why are you trying again?
The agenda was different.
Okay, what was the agenda in 2015?
In 2015, it was simply a case of, let's just show the local lot, the local MPs, there's somebody standing. That if you don't respect our community's position, we have people in the community who are articulate enough to challenge you.
Okay.
And we demonstrated that from the hustings. There were hustings taking place. And by the third or fourth husting, the Labour and the Tory Conservative, for people who don't know, representatives refused to attend because they said, we're not gaining votes, we're losing votes. And this was Attiq Malik, who knew nothing about politics at all and just went in there literally for the fun of it, just to show local politics what's going on. Situation now is different. We don't care about local politics in that regard of just giving a shake. We do care about local politics in terms of servicing the local populace.
Yeah.
But what we are doing here is to address central government. What we are doing here is to try and save lives. There are people's lives at stake. And they were not at stake in this way then. And we are moving strategically, nationally. Nationally, there are independents standing everywhere on the pro-Gaza ticket. Now, Gaza, if I make this clear, isn't the only agenda here. We do have a whole manifesto for the people of Luton. Because if you look across the country, there's a pattern that wherever there are high levels of migrant communities, you will not see investment. You will see poverty. And poverty is the cause of crime. And it's like a vicious circle, right? But the Gaza thing is also very important. A genocide's happening. Feelings are strong. And so we are standing here to try and save lives and change the shape of UK politics.
Let's talk about yourself as a Lutonian. And I always ask you this, off and on camera. How significant was your appearance on 24 Hours Police Custody? In terms of your first appearance, how much did it blow up your personal profile?
In Luton, at the time, within my own community, I was pretty well known anyway.
Of course.
But what it did do, 24 Hours Police Custody, is that outside of my community in Luton, across the whole of Luton, everybody got to know me. But as you said, I got to be known across the country, nationally. I remember when the show first aired, and I was walking through the Luton town centre the next day, every single person in town centre stood up and put their hands in the air, were shouting no comment. Then the next day I went to London and I was walking through Fleet Street. So this is the complete opposite of Luton town centre. And the same thing happened there. And people still remember that as well, and the other appearances. And the good thing about it is, in our communities, we always talk about role models. And what I enjoyed about it was it created a positive role model for our communities, not just locally, but nationally. That we have professions within our community that can stand up to all sorts of adversities and come out victorious, and we can hold our ground, and that we don't have to do other things to earn a decent living and have respect, And we had respect from our peers across the board, from legal industry. We had judges, fellow lawyers, barristers, everybody giving respect, and that's what it's about, isn't it?
You know, when you go through life and you're able to earn respect and leave a legacy.
Do you think Muslims this time round are still, there's still going to be the old guard who are going to vote very tribally with Labour?
So
Are you having any internal tribal issues here locally?
So we have so with the old guard, you just touched on both of them. We have two issues. We have the tribal issue, which some of it translates into the old guard voting for Labour.
Yeah.
We also have the tribal issue, where if somebody stands, irrespective of their history of where they've stood before or whether they're qualified to do so or not, people will still vote for them just because they are from the same family. That's their man.
That's their man.
And our job here is to educate our community. Our job here when we go out in the community is not to attack our community. Because you have to remember our community is a community of trauma. We've been through a lot. And nobody has malice in their heart. They have misunderstanding. And our job is to educate our own community and to show them the way that, look, you have to understand what the strategy is. I've spoken to people from the old guard in the last few days. I said, do you actually know what the strategy is? And nobody's actually spoken to us about the strategy. So I've spoken to them about Gaza, about the strategy of shaping UK politics and all the rest of it. It's taken about 10 minutes ago. And when I finished, they're like, do you know what? We had no idea about all of this. So unless somebody actually sits down and speaks to them, you can't blame them. I think there is a communication barrier too, where we just expect the old guard to jump because we are able to assimilate all the information. But because the language barriers and the cultural barriers, there is also a reality of communication barrier where nobody or people may not be actually communicating to them.
There is also respectfully a lack of strategic thinking as well. In that to vote Labour is the normal thing to do. What else are you supposed to do? Vote
and that's
Tory?
because it's institutionalized.
Yeah.
You know, we have a generation that went through different life experiences to us.
Mm-hmm.
And where you have people who are institutionalized, they feel that it's only via institutions and giving respect to those institutions that we can make a difference. But we know we have had a baptism of fire through life from all of our life journeys. And we know that doesn't always work. And we know that there's nothing to be afraid of when we raise our voices in this country, when we're speaking for the haqq. And that when we stand up, and some of it is a fear factor. Because a lot of these people who jump from one party to another, to another, to another, you say to them, why don't you just stand on your own 2 feet? Why do you need to be with the party? But they're too afraid. Whereas with us, we've got nothing to be afraid of. I've said to many people that, look, a lot of these politicians, if you take away the title of politician, what have they got left? They're nobodies. Alhamdulillah, people like myself and others, we've been working within the communities, not just in Luton, but nationally, for many years. And come or go, whatever happens in elections, we will still be here doing our work. So to us, this election, in terms of our personal sort of progression, not only is it not the be-all and end-all, it doesn't make us. We are standing here for the community as a conduit. So if the community says, oh, we need an option, we want to support Gaza, we want to stop discrimination in our communities, we want someone who speaks for us and not for party politics, we're standing for the community as an option. Now it's for the community to mobilise. We can't win or make a dent unless the community mobilises. So if there's a failure, if there's a loss, it's not our loss, it's not my loss, it's the community's loss. Because the community was unable to mobilise for justice, for truth, and was unable to stand on the haqq, and then they will reap the consequences of that. Tomorrow when Prevent gets ramped up or policing gets ramped up and they take away the backstop of reasonable suspicion and your family members are getting stopped and searched all over the place, just like Schedule 7 works, but on the streets, and all the security services are coming in and taking your children away from you, you're to blame because you voted for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, just staying on that one, thinking of strategic thinking, this election coming up, one issue that's sprung up in many places, again, in places where there happens to be a significant Muslim vote base, is double independent candidates or multiple independent candidates, or a Workers' Party candidate and an independent candidate, and both are running on a pro-Palestine Gaza ticket. And that has naturally, some people have said, some places Labour is doing this as a plant to split the vote. In other places, just opportunists just looking for an opportunity to run, right? Now, in your ward, from what I've heard through the grapevines, there was an individual who was in a run for Workers' Party. Then he, backed down, and because he thought, let yourself come forward, and so now someone else has come forward. Don't go into the specifics of your ward, your constituency. Tell me about the general issue. What's your thoughts on this whole split vote over multiple independent candidates or Workers' Party independent candidates? What's your general thoughts on that?
The general thoughts on it is, this is illustrative of the fact that the people who stand up like this, they are lacking strategic thinking. They don't understand the strategy. They are not standing for the greater good or for the community. They're standing for their own self-gain. Because if they're standing for the greater good of the community, they wouldn't just stand. For example, in Luton, we, before the election was called, we knew the election would be called at some point.
We expected November.
Yeah, November. So what we did, we actually created videos of this. You can see on my social media. We went to every single community, in the Muslim community and other communities that we could find, and said, look, do you know anybody from your community who can stand as a candidate? We did videos inviting people to email in if you want to be an independent candidate. Now, the purpose of that is to have a unified approach. So, for example, whoever stood for Workers' Party, they could have easily emailed in then and said, well, I would like to be considered. But they didn't. And the reason they didn't is because they didn't understand what the strategy is. They weren't part of the strategy. They just didn't get it. Them joining a party and then standing after somebody else has announced as an independent, after somebody has withdrawn and still standing, is indicative of them standing just for their own self-interest.
Now, bringing the podcast to a close, you said for Luton, for Gaza, for change. We've addressed Gaza, its importance, its centrality to this election and to your own campaign. But why should a non-Muslim Lutonian in your constituency vote for you? It's a lot about Gaza. It's a lot about Muslim causes, Muslim grievances, right? Why should a Lutonian in your constituency who's a non-Muslim, or who may not even be for Gaza, who may be indifferent to Gaza, why should they vote for you?
So the far-right narrative is that the Gaza issue is a Muslim issue, that the Palestinian support is support for Hamas. That's a right-wing narrative. The reality is completely different. The Gaza issue is an issue of humanity. Children being killed is something that strikes a chord for everybody, irrespective of your race or religion. And what that is indicative of is that if you have a government that has no humanity about it for other children of others, they will have no care or humanity about your children. And in Luton, being someone who is born in Luton, educated in Luton, runs multiple businesses in Luton, somebody who has been on various boards and trusts. So for example, I'm currently on the board for the Luton Food Bank. So I know from a grassroots perspective, day in, day out, the difficulties our community has. I've sat on a board for a grant-making organisation for the whole of Bedfordshire, where we used to give grants to grassroots organisations and we would assess them on what the issues and the needs of that community are. So I've got that insight, which a lot of politicians don't, because I've been knee-deep grassroots on many different levels for the Luton community and in actual fact for the whole Bedfordshire community. And the reason why they should consider an independent vote, an independent person such as myself, is because, as I said earlier in the podcast, I would not be held back by party politics. Party politics dictate that when you talk about problems in communities, you blame it on the communities, you don't blame it on the government. So when party politics talks about knife crime, any party, they will say, well, in that community there are these issues, so we need to address those issues in this way or this way. Or there's this issue, but they don't talk about the actual elephant in the room, which I'm not afraid to address. The actual elephant in the room for most of the problems that we have in our community in Luton and across the country is actually poverty. United Nations have done global studies on this. Wherever there is a poverty spike, you will see a spike for knife crime and other related crimes like drugs or whatever. So if you could address poverty, you could address most of society's problems. So what is poverty? It's lack of money. Why is there lack of money? Because when you ask the politicians and the parties for money, for investment into communities,
for regeneration, all that kind of stuff.
Anything, any topic, the answer is, we've got no money, there's no magic money tree. Okay, no magic money tree, but you've got millions, if not billions, to support Israel to kill children.
And to send to Ukraine.
And to send all over the world to this war, that war, this war, that war. Where's that money coming from? Why don't we do this? Rather than worry about killing people around the world, Let's stop sending that money there and invest it locally. Now, no party will say that. Only the independent will say that, because nobody wants to talk about poverty. Because when you talk about poverty and you say knife crime is the fault of poverty, or drugs is the fault of poverty, or homelessness because of poverty, do you know what you're actually saying? You're actually saying that these problems are not the problems of migrant communities.
It's the government.
The problem of the government.
Because they've been negligent.
And the government don't want to hear that. So what they do, they use far-right media to promote racist narratives, to shift blame from themselves onto our communities. And the only person who's going to shift it back to the truth and solve your problems is somebody who's not afraid to call it out.
What type of feedback have you had from non-Muslim constituents?
At the moment, where this snap elections happen so quickly, we haven't been able to push out a full manifesto yet and all the rest of it. So non-Muslims at the moment, all they can see is a Muslim guy standing up for Gaza, right? And he's giving out leaflets at a mosque.
Yeah.
Right, that's all they can see, and that's fair. I don't blame them for that, because we're just getting started. What I would say to the non-Muslims is just watch what happens next, because we're only just getting started, right? Anybody who knows me on my track record knows I've never only stood for one community. My work has always been for everybody, and you will see that the work that we will be doing is for everybody. Gaza, I would say, was the catalyst to fire us up, to say, well, we can't just sit here and let these racists run our country. But that's not the end point. That's just the start point.
Hold up. The show will continue. But before it does, I want to remind you all that the Blood Brothers podcast is the fastest growing English language Muslim podcast in the world. When we deliver unique quality content to you week after week, brothers and sisters and friends, it requires money. So please click the link in the description and support this project however you can. Back to the show. There's something you mentioned to me, and before we started filming, you said, Dilly, look, if we have a government, whether it's the current government or the opposition, that is expected to inevitably win, if they don't care about the killing and bombing of children to the level that we've witnessed for the last 8 months, what makes you think that they care about our children going hungry to school and going to bed at night, without food and hungry? And that's actually true. If you think about it, if they don't care about thousands dying and being killed and massacred the way they have been, what makes you think that they're going to worry about your kid?
Well, let's link that to Luton. October 23, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation published a report. Luton was in the top 10 in the country of most destitute towns for poverty of children getting food. Food in one of the 5th or 6th richest countries in the world. How can that come? How can Luton, which is 23 minutes from London, which has got its own airport, a Premiership football team, how do they go up and down? But the point is, a proper football team brings money in. A town that is linked up with the Midlands and the North from motorways and train. You got all the ingredients there for a successful town. Why is there such level of poverty that we're the top 10?
Why has that been Luton's sad legacy? That it is everything that you've described, that close to London, has its own airport, a respectable football team, train lines, motorways, university, everything.
What's missing?
But yet it's still described as that grim town, gloomy, it's dead, depressing.
This is deliberate. This is the result of the government pushing far-right narratives on all towns and cities in the country which have high migrant communities. When they push that, they don't invest in those towns like they should. Big businesses don't invest on these towns like they should. They go to the non-migrant filled towns that don't have people from global majority backgrounds. This is all part of the bigger play here, which people don't see. You look at, there's a pattern across the country. When the recession happens, our communities are least affected by it because they tend to be more cash rich and all the rest of it. We don't believe in mortgages and this, that and the other, right? So generally, we are less affected by the recession, which is a big thing for our communities, a source of pride. Nobody talks about that. The narrative in this country, there is a racist narrative springing from central establishment, central government, which the far-right media push over time, and it's the consequence of that there's no cash injection, the investments taking place that should be, and as a consequence of that, you have poverty and all the crime. Look at East London. Look at Canary Wharf. We know Canary Wharf before it became Canary Wharf. Now look at Canary Wharf.
Absolutely.
How did that happen? Money.
Yeah.
So if they choose to,
Uh-huh.
they can fix. I'll give you another example. This weekend gone, or last weekend, we had that Radio 1 Weekender here. Radio 1 Weekender, thousands of people coming down. Luton's excited, fine, good. But people on social media were saying, do you know what's really strange? Because the whole world's coming here for BBC Weekender, suddenly our streets are spotless. Now, that's not a bad critique. It shows that if the money was injected and if infrastructure was supported properly, our streets could be clean. The reason they're not clean isn't because our people are lazy. It's because central government via local government are not investing in our communities. It's that simple. And we need to open our eyes and hold these people to account and not let them get away with these games.
There's been a whole conversation about the Muslim vote. I know we've had this before in previous general election, but this time it's been formalised, it's been consolidated, and we're starting to see the beginning of something which is quite national, which is quite focused, as one of the representatives recently said in a podcast or an interview, he said, Gaza isn't the only issue, it's the main issue, right? For this general election, right? And that's also been described by the establishment, those in the right, and even in the left, actually, as sectarian politics. Are Muslims wrong to organise the way that they have? Like you've had the official endorsement of the Muslim vote.
Yes.
What's the percentage of Muslim voters or Muslim population in Luton South?
In North and South, it's around about 30%.
It's in the top 10 in the country, I believe,
Yeah.
right? So do you think sectarian politics is a correct term to actually describe what's actually happening nationally up and down the country?
Again, these terms are used to devalue the real thing that's going on. It's just an attack, isn't it? So people who don't like what they're seeing will use this terminology to just bring that movement down. But like I said earlier on this podcast, Gaza, it happens to be, okay, there's Muslims there, but not every Palestinian is a Muslim. There are non-Muslims there. When a bomb is being thrown, nobody's checking, is this landing on a Muslim or a non-Muslim, or which person? It's just indiscriminate.
And churches have been bombed.
Yes.
And Christians have been
Exactly.
killed in Gaza.
Just because nobody talks about it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. We're talking about a people, not a religion. This conflation with religion is what those who support Israel have always done to silence dissent and stop those who critique them from getting power. And this is another example. We have to remember what is happening here. We are standing here for humanity. Humanity does not see race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, age. It's just humans, right? And there is an evil happening right now. And the bottom line is this: if that doesn't motivate people to move and act, then what will? What is the red line?
You referred to it earlier, and you've been describing Luton and the country under 14 years of Tories. Are you basically telling people that we should expect more Toryism, but in red? Is that what you're basically saying?
I'm expecting worse than that. Don't forget, people, Tony Blair, Labour Party, brought in Prevent. And as I said earlier, it's going to get ramped up under Keir Starmer. And don't forget, it was Labour who went into Iraq looking for
WMDs.
Fake weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. It was that war that also killed and displaced millions, caused issues in Syria. It was that sequence of events gave ISIS.
Yeah.
That sequence of events has destabilized the Middle East. For what? Labour was responsible for that.
Uh-huh.
So history has already spoken. Don't forget. Everybody says this, but you need to stick by this. Whatever happens, do not forgive and do not forget. Learn from our lessons.
You ran for election in 2015. Do you think you're on a chance of winning? Genuine question.
The first time I ran,
yeah,
there was no intention to win. I didn't expect to win.
This time.
We're playing to win.
Serious.
We are playing to win because this time there are people's lives at stake. This time, wherever we go, I know you can't go by energies, but whenever we stop people on the street, we've been to door knocking, we've spoken to people, the general consensus is people are sick and tired of the Conservatives, and people see Labour and the Conservatives as two sides of the same cheek, or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? That's the point. So people are disenfranchised. Many people that I've spoken to said, we just given up on politics and weren't going to vote. But because we have an option now, we are going to vote. So yes, I think we are here to win. We have a chance to win. As we said earlier, 30% Muslim population, but our message and our cause goes beyond the Muslim community, which people will see over the coming weeks. We stand here for humanity. We stand here against injustice, against all, discrimination against all. And we are the only ones that will be fearless enough to speak up. Jeremy Corbyn has left the Labour Party, is standing independent, endorsed by Muslim vote. Andrew Finstein as well, over in Holborn. If he succeeds, Keir Starmer doesn't become MP, forget Prime Minister.
Yeah.
We are not a lone, entity here and there. This is a national movement for justice, and you need to make a choice. Everybody needs to make a choice of which side of history they're going to be standing on. Are they going to be silent and complicit, support the evildoers, vote for them and be complicit, or stand on the side of what is right? Because as spiritually, all people of faith, I was speaking to a Christian brother in the gym before I came, and we both agreed that spiritually, we all know that the end outcomes of everything are not in our hand, they're in God's hand, Allah's hands. But what we will be held to account for is, what do we do? Future generations will ask us, what did you do when this evil was happening? And if we say, well, I sent some money and I voted for the nice local Labour person, that's not good enough. And we know that's not good enough. Your heart will tell you that's not good enough. But if you know you've done whatever you possibly could, and there's nothing more you could have done, then you can put your hand on your heart and say that, and you have some semblance of getting blessings for it. My faith tells me that all of us are sinners. None of us are, saints. And we need blessings from wherever we can get. And even putting that aside, how can anybody not do anything when children are being killed the way they are, when men and women are being killed the way they are, when people are being starved? It has to move you. How can you not be moved?
Attiq, it was a pleasure having you on. I wish you all the best for July the 4th, inshallah. And hopefully the next time you're on, you'll be on as an MP. Inshallah. Brothers and sisters and friends, I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed this podcast as much as I did. If you like this episode, do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Plus YouTube channel. And of course, for the major podcast listeners, you can find it on Apple, Google, YouTube Music and Spotify. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.